Hi, I'm Dave Henning with Freshstart Benefits, and I'm very excited today. Have a very special guest. Cynthia James is here, and she is an expert in cybersecurity and runs a cybersecurity training and coaching business called Cyberus Security. She spent over a decade in cybersecurity working for a global cyber intelligence firm. Along the way, she got her master's degree from George Washington University in cybersecurity strategy and information management, and has picked up some very prestigious security certifications. And she's also written a book called Don't Let Cybercrime Ruin Your Life, 60 Secrets to Keep You Safe. And you can get that book on Amazon. Welcome, Cynthia. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me today. I appreciate it.
This is great. So I'm excited because you've been in the business in the midst of a growing epidemic, really, of cybercrime happening all around us. And so you know what you're talking about, and I appreciate that. So tell us, what is Cyberus, and what does Cyberus do?
So we coach executives, that's anything from boardroom to CEOs, on cyber risk and how to manage it from a strategic level. And we also do on-site, hands-on training for employees, and that's customized to the company and the industry. And the idea there is to heal the biggest security gap that all companies have, because 90% of breaches occur because of mistakes that employees make.
Really? That's interesting. I did not know that. So what, in lieu of that, what are the top cybersecurity threats that business have to worry about these days?
The biggest threats, there's four of them. There's ransomware, there's a business email compromise attack, there's a data breach when they steal your data, personally identifiable information, healthcare records, social security numbers, and the last one is not encrypting. As data zings around the web, or we send it back and forth, or we walk out of an office with confidential data and we don't encrypt it, that's the fourth threat.
And so ransomware is a big deal. Of course, we've all heard of this really new common catchphrase. You see it on TV commercials, the dark web, and seems like that is a clearinghouse for people stealing our identities from each other. And of course, ransomware is on the news as one of the most scary things in the world, where your computer can actually get locked up unless you actually pay a ransom to somebody. So do you have any interesting stories about the kinds of things that have happened in your industry?
Well, I think one of the things that scares us the most is when there's something like critical infrastructure, a hospital, a smart building, that getting locked down by ransomware, because that really is a life or death thing. But I'll give you a typical example of how ransomware works. There's a company that I worked with. Around 3 in the morning, the IT guys start getting these strange messages that there's some errors happening in the network. And by the time they got in at 6:30, the entire production floor, it was a manufacturing company in Silicon Valley, had been shut down. And every device in the office and on the floor had a ransom note on it saying, you get everything back if you just pay us $240,000. It was 30 Bitcoins at the time. So they called their cyber insurance company. Cyber insurance company sends them over to a company called Proven Data, that's a ransom remediation company. And what Proven Data does, they say, send us a little bit of the code and we'll tell you what you're dealing with. And they told him 3 things. Number 1, you'll never unencrypt this code without a key. Number 2, this particular gang has a reputation in the 90th percentile of giving you an actual unencrypt code after you transfer the Bitcoin. And number 3, we think that we can negotiate a better ransom. So they did actually successfully get it down to $60,000. And they got the codes and they were able to unlock it, but it put those guys out of business for entirely. And that's the biggest cost of ransomware. They paid the 60 grand, but they actually lost more money than that just having their whole system, shot for a week.
Wow, that is amazing. And you said something interesting, that there's actually cyber insurance out there that this company was able to utilize in this horrible situation, which basically, had their company basically, padlocked, so to speak, for a week, plus the money they had to put out for this. So how common is this? I mean, hopefully it's not happening, or is it happening all the time, every day in the industry?
I hate to say this, but I looked up the recent numbers for what they think this is costing companies in the US, and the business email compromise attack, which is another kind of attack, and ransomware, each of those separately is expected to be in the $12 billion range a year in terms of what it's sucking out of US companies. So it's pretty bad. And no matter what you do, you'll never get as a company down to zero cybersecurity risk. So we always recommend that people cover that extra piece of risk with cyber insurance.
And are we able to identify where these gangs are located out of the country typically?
Always out of the country, because even if there were a great hacker here who wanted to make millions of dollars in a few days, which is what hackers make, they would move to another country to do it. Because if you're living in the US, they'll put you away for 30 years. So we're seeing it over lots of places. I actually talked to an expert this morning. He's with a company out of DC, Stephen Doherty, a company called Firebird, and they work with lots of US Secret Service and people like that. And he said that a lot of the attacks they're seeing for business email compromise are coming out of West Africa, Somalia, places like that. So there's that, there's China, there's Russia, the known places, but pretty much outside the country.
And you also mentioned business email compromise. What's the relationship between an employee coming to work and accessing their personal email on a business computer? Is that a problem?
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. And when we talk about business email compromise, it's actually, we refer to it in the industry just as BEC. And what that usually is that a person's email account, usually a senior executive, was compromised. Or it could be somebody in the accounts payable department. And then what will happen is anybody who's normally paying invoices, they'll get in the middle of that, the hacker will, and they'll start sending out emails saying, just change the account number on that. And people are doing it, willy-nilly. So they change it, and then that next $50,000 is supposed to come in, ends up in the hands of a hacker. So that's business email compromise. And you could see how if you are sending email between your personal email, if you're checking your personal email at work and there's no restraints on that and you don't have good antivirus on that system, you could open up an email and click on a link, and then that could infect your work computer. So we do worry a lot when people are transferring data or sending it back and forth between email and personal email accounts. And in fact, we do have a case of, this is somebody not encrypting. A CEO called me in the last year and said, my controller just sent 362 W-2s to a hacker. And it was just so upsetting because, of course, she was in tears when she figured out that it didn't go to him, but she was actually sending it to a Gmail address. Now, anytime you're doing that, anytime, even if you know it's the Gmail account of the person, the CEO, which in this case it wasn't, but they had spoofed his name, you should encrypt it. You should just always, always, always encrypt anything that's that sensitive. So very disappointing when that does happen.
So I assume that is one of the things that you do in your training. You're training not only owners, but you also train the employees, because you say encrypt it, and I know what you mean, but I don't know what to do. I don't know how do I do that, for example?
Okay, I am on a mission to teach everyone I know how to encrypt because it's so easy. So I'm going to tell you how it works with a Word file. And it's just as simple on Mac. On a Word file, we're used to creating a file, and then we go to save it. The very first option on that page of save, which we've never looked at, says info, protect document. You don't have to do anything extra. Just notice when you go to save it, oh, look, I have this off. Click on protect document, and it pops up a box. Do you want to encrypt with a password? Yes. You get a space for a password. I recommend something long and easy to text someone, like you might say, I love ice cream, all lowercase letters, no special anything. Make it nice and long. And then you text them or you call them, and you say, hey, I just sent you, a file that's encrypted. Here's how you open it. And that's considered two-factor authentication. It's considered layered security, because what if you take this, what if this is a copy of your passport and you're sending it over to a visa office or something, and they say, oh, by the way, they call you a couple hours later, we hate to tell you this, but our systems got compromised. Well, those hackers can't get into your passport information because they didn't have the password. So encrypting is just something we should all do, especially when we're sending things between business and personal email accounts.
So you said something very important that I picked up on, actually, and that is don't email the password. Call them or text them separately. Correct?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. So now, of course, all the big news cycles for things that happened, and most recently, well, a couple years ago now, Equifax 2 years ago, and most recently this year, Marriott and the Star World companies. I think it's Star World, and that was massive, millions of people information. The interesting thing about Equifax is that it wasn't just our credit information; it was other things like our date of birth, and it might have been even our driver's license numbers and things like that. Is that right?
Yeah, it's incredibly frustrating, that particular situation for cybersecurity people. We can't believe that people aren't out in the streets with their pitchforks over that one, because none of us agreed to have them hold our data. It was just a business deal. And actually, we are the product in the case of Equifax. They don't really care about us because we're not their customer. They're selling our information is their product they're giving to other people. So that one is incredibly frustrating, especially when you get the CEO standing in front of Congress and saying, oh, the only thing that the problem there was this one IT guy who didn't apply a patch. Now, that is just absurd. We expect security to be we expect layers and layers and layers and layers of security, and all of them should have to fail if it's standing between, these are all the hackers in the world, all of this data about us that's so valuable, and really, one IT guy makes a mistake. I think I'll put that patch in next week. It's absurd.
Well, my understanding is that Facebook actually purchases information from either Experian or Equifax so that people who advertise on Facebook can drill down to the customer that they want, and that Facebook actually purchases that for their advertisers. Is that right?
That's what they say. Now, Facebook is trying to say they're going to come out with some new privacy sensitivity, but that's the kind of thing we should all be looking at. And that's very scary. A very scary world out there when it comes to privacy. Our privacy has been somewhat obliterated, unfortunately, in the US.
Right. Right, because we've known that with Google AdWords for years, that advertisers can drill down and zero in very precisely on their target audience and not have a scattered approach, which is the intention is to make their advertising more effective because they're reaching the people that wants their stuff, who the advertisers, that is. So yeah, you're right. It's I've always heard people say, well, I don't need identity theft protection because I don't have a computer, I'm not on Facebook, I don't have a smartphone. Well, yeah, but you have a medical identity, and you have a driver's license, and you have a Medicare card, and so we're out there regardless of if we think we're sheltered living on a farm in Montana somewhere.
Right, and one of the problems you have to realize is if we give access to legitimate companies and individuals with all that data, then it's also almost always available to hackers, because hackers will come in representing themselves as legitimate entities, right, to gain that information.
So let's talk about AV. First of all, what is AV?
In our world, AV is antivirus, and it's a little bit of a misnomer because a virus was something from way back, but it took us so long to get the average person to even recognize, oh, antivirus, that's kind of the catch-all phrase, because virus is just one kind of malware. But your antivirus is your best friend, and you should never use the free stuff. You should always upgrade to the most expensive stuff that you can afford to cover all your systems, and because your antivirus is working very, very hard to stay ahead of all the threats that are coming out every single day. And so the most important thing about your antivirus is to recognize it's a living thing. It is downloading updates constantly all the time, and you want to hear it. You want to hear it be chattery to you, because the first sign of infection is when the AV is suppressed. And so if I stop seeing things join my network, or if I stop having my antivirus say, are you sure you don't want to scan that when I plug in media, then I would know something's wrong. So cultivate a good relationship with your antivirus. And if you've shut down your system for a week, turn it on, connect it to the internet, let it suck down all those updates, and then go do your internet browsing.
So I think I'm using something called ESET, which was referred to me by an IT expert in our area, and it seems to be, it's like you say, it's always updating, and I can go in there if I want to and manually scan it, but it's always scanning. It's even scanning my external hard drive as well. So so far so good, but it would be pretty scary. Let me ask you this. This is an interesting question, because Apple products use a different kind of platform compared to Android. product. Is there a difference in the security levels on different devices like that?
There is a difference. I love open systems, so I don't want to knock Android. But one of
Sure.
the challenges with an open system is that they've got the operating system, they've got the hardware, they've got the carriers. There's a whole line of sort of a chain of command. So when a vulnerability is discovered, it has to go through all this process of testing, and then the phone companies have to say, do we really want to upgrade that security on an older phone, things like that. Apple, owning the entire block, can make updates faster, security updates and things like that. So that's at least one thing that makes it more secure. There's also a little less malware that's targeted at Apple and Mac platforms, because Windows is so popular, there's so much of it, and hackers are kind of lazy. I mean, they're really into it, like any criminal, for the return on investment. So they'll go after the Windows system before they'll go after other.
Oh, okay.
So, by the way, in fact, that's what I would suggest. If somebody has an email, you know, sometimes you get an email, you say, I think I should check it, but it could be spam. Sometimes I recommend that, you know, if you just can't wait, check it from your iPhone, because it'll be a little bit safer.
Really? Now, I have gotten into the habit of if something looks like it's a fishy looking email, no pun intended, but I can scroll my mouse over the address, and and at the bottom of my screen, it'll pop up what the address actually is. It'll kind of like open up and tell me, and we got something from supposedly TSA. You know, we have that TSA security thing for when we fly, and it says, oh, you're up for renewal. And my wife asked me, hey, look at this email. What is this? And so I did that, and it was not from .gov. In fact, I called one of my private investigators, and he said, that's exactly right. What's the email address from? And I told him, he says, that's fake. Let's not, without even opening the email. And then, of course, there's the issue that we hear about all the time, where people will open an email and then they'll click on something without knowing what it is or where it's going. A big issue right now that I've heard is real estate exchanging hands, where the deposit money or the earnest deposit, which can be big amounts on a house, are getting hacked and picked. You know, the money's being robbed before somebody can close on their house. So, do you have any current information on that deal?
Real estate has definitely picked up. FBI came out a couple years ago now saying, 2017, they talked about the pretty massive increase in hacker attacks on real estate for that very reason. There's lots of money changing hands. They actually said it went from $19 billion of losses, $19 million of losses, to over $1 billion just between 2016 and 2017. So we're definitely seeing that sector being attacked more. And I hate to say this, it's probably politically incorrect, but real estate agents, even commercial ones, have a little bit of a reputation for not being the most disciplined when it comes to their cybersecurity.
Yeah. Yes, I've read the articles on that situation. So what I hear you saying, what we've talked about today, is it's coming from a lot of different places, all different kinds of robbery schemes, basically, that are attacking us from different points of our identity. So besides what you've talked about, you said there's something that you call a trifecta. What does that mean?
If we're teaching people on site, for example, we will say, never, ever, ever, if you see these three things in an email, act on it without taking it to IT. And that's the solution, is IT. So these are the three things. You get an email that involves a transfer of money. They say that it's urgent and has to happen quickly, and it's confidential. You can't ask anyone else about it. And it looks like it came from your boss or it came from the CEO. And it's usually going to be a time when hackers have figured out that that person is not in the company, that they're out on vacation or something like that. So it's amazing how often they get away with large sums of money, $500,000 or even double-digit millions of dollars that get transferred that way without them realizing it. The solution to confidential is to just go ask IT. Say, I can't discuss this with anyone else. I just need to know, did this email originate from the CEO, and has the CEO's account been hacked? And that would eliminate 99% of them.
I think what I hear you saying, and what I feel is happening, is there is a gross naivete amongst the public, amongst employees, even amongst business owners, that oh, it might happen to them over there, but it's not going to happen to me. And it does happen to me and you and everybody else at some point. Millions of people are affected by this eventually. So what's the challenge with, you were mentioning, I think one time when we were sharing about that you recommended in regard to these breaches that we hear about all the time, there's a whole list of just 2018 and now in the new year. And what was your recommendation to companies who are experiencing breaches? Because this can be a nightmare for their vendors, for their business, and et cetera. So what do you tell them? What should they do?
The most important thing is layered security, and we have a list of 25 policies that we say every company needs to figure out how they've implemented. And all of them will have been implemented, some of them, but it's good to see what the holes are. And training. That's what I would say. One of the problems is that there's lots of companies out there that do this online training, and it's just not enough to get employees excited and engaged. You really need to be there in the room. You need to see their faces. You need to make sure they get it. And we like to start from the perspective of protecting people at home. So it's like an employee benefit. How do you protect yourself and your family? Because everyone cares about that. Everyone, from the CEO down to the guy, in the warehouse. So we start with that, and then we help them understand that those very same security principles, are the same thing in the office, and they just kind of bring that to work with them. And this is great because if you can get employees to practice safe activity, they call it cybersecurity hygiene now. If you can get them to practice that at home, they will bring those same habits to office, and they're not going to walk in to work with malware with them either.
So there have been breaches in companies right around here even. Do you tell them to go public with that and just let everybody know that, hey, we got breached?
We always tell people not to let anyone know they were breached. And this might not seem reasonable or fair if you don't understand cybersecurity, but it is absolutely not a level playing field, because you can have two companies. One company has such terrible cybersecurity that they don't even realize that they're leaking out data, and hackers that own their network. It can be so bad. And then you've got some other guys that came along, they started implementing stuff, and now they can have triggers when they see someone's in, and they actually discovered that they were breached. Now, the majority of companies don't realize that they were breached for 200 days. These guys are so good that they figured out in a few weeks, and they stopped the hacker or whatever. Maybe they got away with something. If these guys go public and tell people we got hacked and somebody took our data, all their clients go over to the other company that has much worse cybersecurity. So that is the problem. Cybersecurity is something that can change dramatically overnight. You can have a pretty good system, for example, and then the guy that did all the programming and knows all the codes and stuff, goes to another company or gets hit by a bus or something, and then everything changes. So or you're using some servers and a flaw is discovered while you're asleep. When you wake up in the morning, hackers are busy trying to exploit the flaw. So that is the challenge of cyber. Very complicated, and you need lots of layers, and you never talk about a breach if you can help it.
So 200 days is like over 6 months before some company might even know that they've been compromised. So let me ask you this. Obviously, my listeners and viewers are going to want to talk to you, and if you are a business owner, I highly recommend that you contact Cynthia James. And what is the best way for people listening to this interview to contact you?
By email. So I also go by CJ, and so it's CJ at the company is Cyberus, CYBER, spelled just like Cyber US, but a takeoff of the three-headed dog, Cerberus. So it's cybersecurity.com, all one word.
Security.com. I noticed that's not a Gmail address.
Right.
Right. So yeah, we all have the free email accounts, but free comes with a price tag, if you know what I mean, right?
Yes.
So
right.
what other tips can you offer our audience? You're talking about personal employees having some kind of protection. There's a lot of services out there. There's probably couple dozen places claiming to protect your identity and monitoring, and even banks and you name it. Everybody's got some kind of a plan. Give them $12 a month or whatever, and they're watching your back, kind of thing. However, what's the best route for what's the most comprehensive thing that you would personally recommend that you've seen?
There's two things I think people need to do. One, start using a password manager, because you've got to start using different ones for different sites. That's number one. And number two, as you're mentioning, ID security protection, right? Securing yourself from ID theft is important. And like you said, there's different products out there. As you know, this got us talking in the first place, is ID Shield is a really interesting product because it has investigators. And one of the things you have to think about when we talk to companies about this too is, what happens after a breach happens? How do you get it all taken care of? You don't want someone to just alert you to the fact that your identity was stolen. You want somebody to try to remediate that and fix it for you. And that's something I really liked about the ID Shield product when I looked into it. And that's something that I think you can help the audience figure out how to get to, right?
Sure. Yes, I've been with this company. It's a 46-year-old company now that's been doing this for years, So we have a service that I promote, and if someone wants to check that out for themselves, it's stopidtheft.co, stopidtheft.co, and there you can get a little 2-minute video that explains the nature of the problem and the solution. Because as you've already mentioned, Cynthia, unfortunately, hacking and identity theft really cannot be stopped, but it can be taken care of. And wouldn't it be great to have your own licensed private investigator in your back pocket on an app where you can get access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if an emergency comes up? And I've got my share of horror stories that has also been solved because people have had the proper protection. And I appreciate you mentioning that you support the service that we offer. I happen to think it's, in comparison, there's some nice companies out there, some sincere people. However, I like to have the best of the best and the premium service that is available. So again, it's been exciting to interview you and share this with you because, as you mentioned, we could go on for hours because there's so many stories and so much information. But the best bet is for people to contact you directly, CJ at cyberussecurity.com. And we appreciate you being with us today. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Dave. I really appreciate being here.